Thank you, Nadia, very much. My name is Kialo Jones. I'm a former classroom teacher, now working in partnerships at Kialo. We make a discussion tool designed to train critical thinking and civil discourse. And thank you all for coming to this presentation, which is going to be, as Nadia introduced, about how online discussions can move from the threaded forum we're also used to be transformed with digital argument mapping. Very briefly, because I'm sure we're all aware of the pedagogical importance of discussions, but why are they so important? Why have they been used for so many thousands of years? Because they deepen learning, because they actively engage students, right? When students are discussing, they're moving beyond memorization into analysis and reasoning, and they're creating an ownership over their own learning. Also, they build these vital 21st century skills we hear so much about, critical thinking, collaboration, and communication, because when students are discussing, they're learning to articulate their own positions, they're listening, and they're responding effectively, and they're practicing skills that are going to serve them throughout their lives. And finally, although this could be a much longer list, discussions are a way for students to build a sense of community within the learning environment. They're connecting with their peers, they're being exposed to different perspectives, and they're feeling that their voices matter. And that sense of community is really important to keep students motivated, particularly in courses where they might not have face-to-face time. And so when we want to have asynchronous discussion activities, we are faced with problems that don't exist in oral discussions. The first of these is that there's a laggy feedback loop. So the motivation, the momentum that happens in a synchronous discussion activity is obviously lost when students are coming in at different times and participating. There's also a lack of social cues, right? If it's a text-only exchange, there's no tone of voice, there's no facial expression, there's no rhythm of turn-taking, which keeps the discussion moving, and students can have a heightened fear of judgment about contributing because of that. And these kind of combine to create a low social presence in asynchronous discussion activities. So you would think we would have lots of exciting ways of holding asynchronous discussions, given that there are all these challenges, and there are different kinds of tools out there, but still a very commonly used tool, especially in higher education, is the reply stack forum. And the forum is as old as the internet, and it hasn't changed so much since it first started. It survived for obvious reasons. It's intuitive, it makes sense, but it isn't geared towards having deep discussions where everybody is participating and where they're actually connecting ideas together. A lot of this is just the format of the forum itself. Where do forums fall flat for students? The contributions on forums are often quite shallow. The way that students interact with each other is not really engaging with each other's ideas unless they're extremely self-motivated. Often they just respond to the teacher's prompt, they reframe things that have already been said, or they simply agree in order to tick the box for the exercise. Forums can also become quite messy and unstructured. If students are contributing a lot, it's hard to follow how the discussion is progressing. If a student makes a point early on in the discussion and another one wants to respond to it, they need to quote that at a later on post, and it's really quite difficult to see how the discussion is connected together. And finally, forums can be quite discouraging for some students. There are barriers to participation. Some students who want to write a lot can dominate, writing multiple paragraphs, and then others can fear judgment by participating, particularly if they want to disagree with something and make a counter-argument, because it can seem combative to make this point. And yes, finally, to just reframe, the format itself is not super engaging for students, especially digital natives who are used to all kinds of different flashy interactive pieces of software. And it's not very easy for educators to fix this problem. Of course, we can clearly set our expectations for students, model the kind of interactions we want them to have, but often what educators end up doing is asking students to post once, respond to their peers, and it ends up being an uphill struggle. So the alternative that I'm here to talk about is to move from these messy, unstructured form threads to an argument map. And what is an argument map is the obvious next question. An argument map is a digital tool for visually structuring argumentation. So you start with a proposition at the top, The proposition is pineapple belongs on pizza. So as you can see, argument mapping can be used to debate some of the most challenging questions of our time. And this proposition is then supported by more arguments below, the ones, the because clauses down here, or weakened by the arguments against, the counter arguments. This is an idea that comes from analytic philosophy. It's been used in philosophy for many years. And what we do at Kialo is we allow you to create a digital collaborative argument map that students can engage with. So how it works on Kialo is that you start with a central thesis statement, the proposition at the top. In this case, the so-called dark ages were not all that dark. Students then add pro claims underneath to support that argument, and they add con claims to weaken that argument. So far, that's just a pro-con list. Where it becomes interesting is that each of these claims can then have its own set of pros and cons. And what you end up with is a map out like this. You can visualize it in two different ways. So here on the left, what you can see is a single branch of the discussion. So this is one area of interest that the students have drilled down into. And what you can see on the right is the overview of the entire discussion. This allows educators to mouse over all of the different points and decide and get an overview of how students have contributed. It also allows students coming into it to decide where they want to participate. So it's, I mean, you can imagine it visually like this. Really, the best way is to interact with one yourself. So I've set up a discussion here. If you want to join via the QR code or type the URL, and I'll leave it up for a moment. Okay, I think everybody's in who wants to be in. Oh no, I still see some phones up. Okay, so yes, please move around. The main piece of instruction that I would give is that you only want to make one argument, one idea, 1 point per claim. Explore the different navigation methods, and that's the little toggle at the top. And also check out your assigned tasks, that's in the top right. That will help you to dig down into the deeper levels of the discussion. So please contribute to that while we get through the rest of the presentation, and then we'll take a look at the end. So how does argument mapping help students when compared to traditional forums? Students have higher quality interactions with each other because each post that they make is necessarily responding to another student's idea or one of their own ideas. And they're not just agreeing or disagreeing with it, they're needing to add more additional supporting evidence or a counter-argument against that point. So it leads to higher quality interactions from students. Secondly, they give the discussions a structure which they don't have in threaded forums. Students are focusing on one idea at a time, and if they come in on day 3, for example, they can decide exactly which part of the discussion they find interesting and respond exactly to that point without it messing up the whole structure of the discussion. And thirdly, it lowers barriers to participation when compared to traditional forums. Students are much more comfortable, quote unquote, disagreeing with their peers in an argument mapping format, because they're not, this is the whole format of the discussion, is designed to build out all of the pros and cons. So it doesn't feel combative to say, you had this idea and I think that this point weakens it. It's just building out the whole discussion together. And how does it help educators? As I said, the inherent structure means that you don't have to come up with different complicated instructions in order to try to get students to engage in the forum discussions. The structure is already there. I think I mentioned earlier, it also allows educators to get an overview of the entire discussion, and argument mapping has a very clear pedagogical benefit, which is that it trains critical thinking skills. Critical thinking skills are often hard to define, but whatever definition that you use, critical thinking skills involve constructing arguments, analyzing and evaluating others' arguments, and metacognition of some kind, right? And argument mapping is metacognition visualized. Students are visualizing the process of thinking. And there's a lot of support for this from experts on critical thinking pedagogy. That being able to visualize your thinking in this way and see the logical connections between points really encourages critical thinking skills. So, when is it a good idea to use argument mapping instead of a forum, and when is it not? The key thing is that it needs to be around a debatable topic, right? So any kind of debatable topic that you would have normally a whole class discussion or a small group discussion, argument mapping is fantastic. It's also really, really effective as a preparation for oral discussions in seminars, whether in person or online. And we've seen a lot of usage in that case, particularly for language learning, where students are going to have a discussion in the language that they're learning. Being able to see how the different arguments connect beforehand and practice that is really, really beneficial. And we've also seen a lot of educators using it as a way for students to prepare essays, or also as an alternative to essay writing. So if the purpose of the written assignment is simply to practice your argumentation, you don't actually need all of the fluff around that, which is writing a lot of connecting sentences and so on. You can actually just practice those arguments inside an argument map. And yes, how can you create effective argument map activities? As I mentioned, you need to start with a debatable statement. Here are a couple of examples. It doesn't work if you want to just get students to introduce themselves, for example. That's a forum would still be your best bet there. So you start with a debatable statement. And then what we would encourage is that you scaffold participation by adding some starting claims, and this is in order to demonstrate the idea that there's a single idea in each of the claims, and this is really important. And the final point is that when you have held a discussion with students, you have a resulting argument map. That's a shared artifact that you can then use with the students. So you can have them vote on which claims are most impactful, have them go through and analyze the reasoning made by others, and also springboard it into another activity, like a writing activity or an oral discussion. So how can you map out arguments on Moodle? Well, you can use Kialo, of course, and it's really easy. We have our discussion plugin on the plugin directory, grading and group compatible, and it won't cost you anything. So that's all my slides. We have quite a bit of time left, and what I wanted to do was go into the discussion, see if people have contributed, and then answer any questions with that view. So let me move here.
Khai, this was amazing. I will start using. I don't know what I did before. I wasn't using this. So great. So do we have any questions for Khai? Guido.
My name is Guido from LearnLink, Moodle partner in Germany. I tried your plugin and I was very impressed that this is possible and so easy to use. Thank you very much. But for a discussion, we had the idea that something is missing, and this is to maybe have not only pro and cons, but also ideas we would like to add. So just new ideas maybe could be filtered afterwards, and this is one thought I want to share. The other question I have, or the real question I have, what is your business model behind Kialo? How do you finance this free forever plugin?
The first suggestion, one that we sometimes get, the second question, one that we always get. On the first point about being a feature that isn't a pro-con connection, right? We've thought about different ways to do that. It's essentially just a mind map in that sense. And actually what's kind of special about this is that there is a logical relation between the points. Once there isn't a specific connection and you just say these ideas are connected, it kind of loses the functionality that makes it what it is. But it is something that we've kept thinking about. And if you had a specific proposal, a specific way that you envisaged it, I'd love for you to pass that on to us. The second one, in terms of the business model, Kialo as a company exists with the mission to make the world more thoughtful. Another way of framing that is to increase the net amount of critical thinking in the world. And with that mission, we're fully funded by a non-profit, a philanthropic foundation that funds us to complete that mission. Actually, before Kialo was an educational tool, it was a public site designed to designed for online discussions that are based in logic and reason rather than the combative nature of online discourse.
We have more questions for Khai? Okay, so please give him a round of applause because this is amazing.
We have one right here.
Right away.
Thank you very much.
This was amazing. Oh, you have one. Sorry, I didn't see you. You have a question.
If you have some minutes left, perhaps you could talk about the way that people can interact with arguments made, because I think you touched that only briefly, and I just clicked into it and was very impressed that you can actually interact with one argument. You don't have to add something like thanks or a thumbs up, thumbs down. You can even go further.
Yes, so just to show how it works in practice. Do you mean the voting feature? I'll just
The voting feature and all the others that I just saw in a second's moment.
Yes, yeah. So you can see here the two different ways to visualize it. Here is the tree, and often what happens when it's a large group is you get a lot of top-level claims like this. Obviously, if you're using it with a classroom of 20, you don't want each person to post 3 or 4 claims at the top. So when you dig down onto one of them, let me change to this view. Yes, you can see how people have gone down into the deeper level with the cons below here. And this is one thread down here. And here you can get the whole overview. So in terms of how a student is choosing which argument to interact with, I think that this is what makes it so much more engaging than a forum, is that they come in and they can hover around all of the discussion and decide which is the interesting point for them, which is the part that they want to respond to. In terms of the not up or down feature, liking or disliking feature, what we have here is a voting feature that is specifically about the claim's impact. In our Help Center, we have a definition of how we think about impact. It's not just that this is a good argument, and not just that it's an idea that I agree with, it's that it's a convincing argument that is contextually related to the point above. Of course, in a classroom setting, teachers don't always use that definition for impact, and you can have all different ways to use it. As participants vote, this changes the tone of the color, the red or the green. So if students all vote on all of the claims, you'll be able to see which ones are darker, are the claims that they thought had the most impact, and which ones are lighter are the claims which they thought had the least impact. So I'm not sure if that answered your question. Yeah? Are there any other questions? Go ahead.
Thank you. I would like to know if the plugin is translated into Spanish, and about the grading, how the teacher can grade the students' answers or claims, or it's like another kind of grading.
Yes. So on the first one, the user interface is translated into in 5 different languages. So we have English, Spanish, German, French, and Portuguese. We also have a lot of users who are not using in any of those languages, because the discussion itself can obviously be had in any language, and we also support left to right, right to left scripts, for example, like Arabic, for example. But the user interface is only in those 5 languages, so yes, in Spanish. In terms of the grading feature, I won't be able to show you it for this one because the instant access discussion. But yes, you're able to grade each claim, cycle through all the claims of a student and add a grade that you can then create an average for. And with the Moodle plugin, you can then send those back to the gradebook immediately. Yeah.
Have you tried to convert normal forums into a discussion and then continue the discussion? Maybe there's a way to find out, is it pro, con, and so on?
Yes. So for example, you mean taking all of the content of a forum and then seeing, can you translate that into a discussion? It's now possible with AI, because what you really need to do is you need to remove the repetitive points in the forum, right? we've played around with that, experimenting a little bit. I'm not sure that it's, I'm not sure how much, yeah, it's not a feature on our roadmap, let's say like this. But yes, it is interesting. It's something that can be fun to do. And it's something you can do yourself with a chatbot. If you show it the structure, if you export a Kialo discussion and then you have the structure of how that discussion should be, you can then use that to model how you can change the form.
I like this. More questions?
Just a quick question about, you mentioned about tutors using it as a shared artifact. Have you got any examples about how they would do that? Obviously, hard to do with us on the spot because you've not read the responses, but how would somebody deep dive with the participants?
Yeah, so for example, there's a feature, guided voting feature here. So you can try this out yourself here. And this will bring you through each of the claims to vote on them one by one. So you can instruct students to use the guided voting feature, go through and vote on all of the claims. And then at the end, you have the map of which claims are more convincing, which ones aren't. And then you can ask them to, okay, I want you to come up with an argument for why these are the claims that are the most convincing, or have a small group oral discussion about why you think this was the case. So that's one example of using as a shared artifact. In the case of where you have a small group discussion, so we find, I mean, a big hole here. Actually, we find the highest levels of participation are with groups from 5 to 10 students. So if you have a small group discussion like that, the resulting map can be something that they refer back to then as, okay, you had a 10-minute discussion, you put all of the ideas into the Kialo map after discussing orally, and this is then the record of that discussion that you had that you can refer back to. Yeah.
Hello, it's about the artifact that it was just questioned. Can you put in a kind of pre-populated artifact and then just use the voting features?
So can you pre-populate it yourself?
Well, maybe have a discussion from somewhere else, export it and put it into a course. So there's already been a discussion, and then you can get your students to go through and maybe mark it or have a further discussion on it.
Yeah, there isn't currently a way of submitting something that isn't a discussion and then turning it into a discussion. Like, you would have to fill it out manually, claim by claim. That is a really interesting idea, though, to be able to, kind of touching on the converting the forum idea, right? Being able to just condense all of that down and then put it in. It's not something we currently can do. But yes, that's a really interesting idea. One use that we do see that's somewhat similar to that is where educators have had a discussion with one group of students. They then clone the discussion, completely anonymize it, and then use that as a resource for a new group of students to then go through and examine or critique the claims or vote, something like that, yeah.